Welcome Wargamers, Doug here from 2 Plus Tough, and today I want to talk about a game that has really gotten my attention lately, and that is Fallout Wasteland Warfare. This game is produced by Modiphius, and it is essentially a 1 to 2 player skirmish game where you take control of some of the famous characters from the Fallout franchise, I think going all the way back to Fallout 2, all the way to, of course, to Fallout 4. So what I'd love to do in this video is talk about this game. Who it's for, I think, is really an important question because this is not a game for everybody. That being said, it's a game that I think a lot of people are sleeping on because maybe they don't love the Fallout franchise. And that's totally cool, but the actual gameplay and mechanics I find to be incredibly interesting. So throughout this video, you're going to see pictures from various websites and things like that, just of gameplay, just to kind of have some nice B-roll to break stuff up while I explain what Wasteland Warfare is and who it's for. So from a top-down perspective, you are essentially taking the role of a small group of X. X could be survivors, it could be super mutants, it could be raiders, it could be the Institute if you're playing from the Fallout 4 kind of timeline. You just take a group of warriors, you equip them however you want, they all have different skills and things like that. You can of course make one sort of an epic hero character to represent really all the things that you can do as a player character in the video games. And it really is a tabletop, I guess, representation of the video game series. You have skills like lockpicking, computer hacking that are coming very important when it comes to like objective play. You also, of course, have a huge arsenal of weapons, like an ungodly number of weapons and items and things like that that you can cash in on. And really what a game is you and your opponent play against each other, but there's usually an objective in the game that you're both trying to compete. Either it's asymmetrical, meaning you're trying to do a thing and your opponent's trying to stop you from doing it, or it's symmetrical, you both have the same goal. And honestly, I like the versatility of it. It is a game, I will be honest with you, that is much more built around campaign play than literally anything else. Because there's a few, like, I guess we would call them matched missions, like where you both have the same objective, like in most war games. But honestly, a lot of the missions are all about attacker-defender, or maybe one side's trying to find computer data, so they need to hack a whole bunch of terminals, and the opponent's just trying to stop them. You're going to see a few things that are very familiar when it comes to skirmish games in that, you activate a model, it gets 2 actions, and then your opponent activates a model, it gets 2 actions, and that kind of thing. Of course, there are other things layered on top of that, like leaders who can inspire other people to act sort of out of activation on their own whenever they want. So there's all kinds of different layers, but at its core, it's basically what it is, and that's going to sound very familiar. But what interested me so much about it is the way that it kind of incorporates role-playing game mechanics. You see, usually when we talk about, we'll compare it to, say, like Warhammer, where you have a 2-hit roll, 2 wound roll, whether it uses strength and toughness like in 40k or it's a flat number like in AOS, it doesn't really matter. You're just aiming for a specific number on a 6-sided die. Well, with Fallout Wasteland Warfare, essentially every unit has like a list of characteristics, their special stats, which is pulled straight from the video game that I love, and you're essentially trying to roll a skill die and get equal to or less than whatever, the value of that skill is. So let's say your strength is 7, you're trying to hit somebody, you need to roll 7 or less. That's an oversimplification, but I'll show you what I mean in more detail soon. What's cool about that, though, is that within that, you also have extra dice that provide special effects, and this is really where the game starts to rope in all of the feel of Fallout with these special effect dice, because this is where you get things like plasma guns turning people into goo. It's where you get VATS, which is your Pit-Boy targeting system, being able to snipe people from far away. All those kinds of things go into making some of these actions extremely thematic. And if I had to choose a word to describe this game, as well as its kind of sister game, Call to Arms, which is a Skyrim kind of take on this, thematic is the word that I cannot emphasize enough. If you're somebody who loves games like Necromunda because of just the craziness that's happening, I can't tell you enough how much you will enjoy this. And I'm not like, they didn't pay me, I'm not making any money, I bought this with my own coin. I'm just saying I think it's an awesome system, and I'll tell you why. Now, I've gushed about this game quite a bit, and I like to do reviews as sort of a compliment sandwich. So we're going to put in some of the negatives here, and then I want to end by talking about more things that I really love. The negatives here are that this game uses more tokens than grains of sand in the frickin' ocean, okay? So I have this little thing here. You can see all the little tokens inside. I have 1, 2, 3 of these. These are the base tokens that come with Fallout Wasteland Warfare, and this doesn't even count like the rulers, because all of the movement values and the range values are kind of measured out by these little measuring things. Let me get one and I'll show you what I mean. This is what I'm talking about. They basically have everything color-coded, and then also there's little edges and notches to tell you if you're colorblind which one to use. So it makes it very, very simple, but essentially every weapon, range, every attack, everything is measured with these things. Now, of course, you will very quickly get used to measuring stuff with this, but it is kind of annoying to have this. Like, there's, I think, 3 or 4 more of these, and your 3 stacks of tokens, which I can't imagine not getting these little organizer dealies to keep track of them, because I would just lose my mind. And if we're talking negatives, same thing with the dice. Here's a whole heckin' ton of dice. And in addition to all of that, there's a lot to keep track of when it comes to the missions, the quests, and there is a AI mode where you play basically a solo game versus the AI. And that just adds a layer of complexity. I'm not going to really include that in this because it really is its own game system, and I feel like requires a fuller discussion on it. But essentially, there's just a lot to keep track of and a lot of upkeep to do. If you do it, you will find, I think, that it's a pretty cool game. So what I'm going to do is go to the downward cam and show you what some of the weapons and the armor and all that kind of stuff, how that all works, because it's really foundational to understanding why the game has so much depth to it. All right, and here we are at the downward cam. We're taking a look at 2 pretty common basic profiles. We have the Sole Survivor, which is, of course, the main character from Fallout 4, as well as the Settler, which is just kind of a basic humanoid that you can bring with you all throughout the game. Now, we're going to look at these cards a little bit. I know that my camera, my up-down camera, is not nearly as good as my face-forward one, but I think you'll understand. I'm going to talk it all out loud anyway, so if you're painting, just hang in there. Essentially, we're going to start off from top to bottom. If you see this little Pip-Boy icon, it means it's a named character and you can only have one of them. That's all. There's nothing super special about it. For demonstration purposes, they have Sole Survivor and Sole Survivor Day 1. So this is you fresh out of the vault, ready to get your teeth kicked in, and this is you with a little bit of seasoning to you, right? You've been in the wasteland, you know what's up. As far as these things are the special stats, of course, you will see that I mentioned before, you're trying to roll equal to or less than, and that might seem hard given some of the lower numbers. And so now we're going to talk about skill tests. Skill tests are everything in this game, and they all follow the same basic premise. Now, the skill die is this white D20, okay? What you'll notice, though, is that not every side is numbered. It doesn't go all the way to 20. Instead, it goes 1 through 10, and then there's a bunch of like extra symbols. The X is a critical fail. Nothing can make that a success. You have an X and a cog. Essentially, you fail your attack, but you do get an action point, so maybe you can use VATs later on to auto-target things. You have a critical success, action points, and then a bunch of numbers. Sounds like a lot. So we're going to roll a die. Let's say we were trying to use our perception. We needed a 7. We rolled an 8. We would fail that. So let's talk about actually using some of these abilities, because I know this looks like a lot of information. You're going to look at what they're equipped with, and the top lines are ranges. So for example, the pistol can only shoot in blue range. Okay? The hunting rifle, it can shoot in blue range or black, which is an even longer one, but I have it packed away, so unfortunately I can't get it right now. And what you're going to do is look at what range you're shooting in and roll whatever modifier dice contribute to it and apply those effects. So, make this very simple. Sole Survivor has a rifle. She has a perception of 7. And let's say we're firing at somebody in short range. We're going to add 2 yellow dice, just like the little diagram says. Let's roll this. And for the purposes of just demonstration, we're going to do this. I'm just going to change that to a 5. 5 is less than 7, which means it is a successful hit. and these other dice modify that. So this is going to add 1 more point of damage. You can see the rifle here does 2 damage to physical type damage. So now it's going to do 3. And this little cracked helmet means it's going to reduce my opponent's armor by 1. It's like armor piercing. So if we were to look over here, the defender, the settler, only has 1 armor. It's going to go away. So basically it's like rend basically. Same thing for the pistol over here. If we were to do that, we would take our skill die. It tells us to do 1 black and 1 green die. And we'll roll these. And let's see. Oh, another critical. Rolling all kinds of crits over here. Let's say it was a 3. It would be 3 minus 2, which is 1. So it's an awesome success. And then this one as well is going to pierce 1 thing of armor. Essentially, these effect dice are how they control how effective a weapon is. And so the green ones, for example, have a lot of negative modifiers, meaning they make your lowers number and therefore more successful. You'll also see anytime there's a little star like that, that means it adds a damage. There are actually some sides of the die like this that add 2 damage, which is crazy. All the negative numbers, of course, like I said before, are modifying your attacks. And then anytime you see a fun symbol, like a little Nuka-Cola bottle, what else we got? A star, we got a little explosion doom sign. Whenever you see these, if you look at the weapon profile, and unfortunately I don't have one here, it can also trigger a special effect. So let me get that one for you. So for example, let's, instead of a hunting rifle, let's do the same thing with a laser rifle, which is going to have us roll a skill die, a black die, and a blue die. Blue dice a lot of times will be for energy weapons. And just like before, I'm just going to choose these numbers so we can kind of do a demonstration. Let's say we got 3 and a Coke bottle. Boom. Okay. If we rolled this, we would pass the test because we were at 7 or lower, thanks to the 3. We would do an extra damage because of this black die. So instead of 2 energy damage, it would be 3 energy damage. And this little Coke bottle, if you look down here, the Nuka-Cola is, if there's 1 Nuka-Cola, 1 damage ignores armor. So we essentially have armor piercing 1. If we were to have the symbol with 2 Nuka-Cola bottles, it sets the person on fire. Essentially, the laser rifle is burning them to death. Now, as I mentioned before, there are spots on the die that are going to have this little cog. Okay, and I know it kind of shows up as fuzzy on the screen. I'll try to get a better picture of it. But this little cog represents action points, which is kind of the way it works in the video game. You accrue action points and you build up your critical meter, and then you spend it, and all of a sudden you get a super attack. That's represented by this little grayed out part here on the right. Now, if you're not playing with anyone who has access to VATS, like a lot of characters don't, you can pretty much just ignore that entire part. But for everybody else, if they do have VATS, meaning they're a hero, they're part of your warband or whatever, let's say you had 3 of these little action points on your guy, and you roll, let's see if I can find the right side here, that one. Okay, that is another little action point cog. You now have 4, you have enough, you spend them all, and you do this attack instead of this one. And all that really means is you're going to choose your range just as normal, except now the attack's going to do 4 damage, and you automatically apply 1 Coke bottle. So it's automatically going to go from 2 damage to 4 damage, which in this example would make it 5 damage. And then plus 1 of the Coke bottles, which means you're going to at least ignore 1 thing of armor. What I'm really getting at here is that there's a lot of icons, there's a lot of tokens, there's a lot of measurements, there's a lot of stuff, there's a lot of dice. The thing is that it all tells you exactly what to roll and exactly what to do when it happens. You just have to get better at reading it. And once you're good at reading what all the effect dice do and all that kind of stuff, it's really easy. It's very intuitive because, again, it's just broadcasting everything to you. You have very minimal choices. I mean, you can spend stuff to do critical attacks or not, but that's really about it. So all those things I said before about the game feeling like a lot, feeling very like overwhelming, it will feel very overwhelming until you learn how to read basically how these cards and their dice activate. Now, luckily, there's not like a ton to learn, you know, like it's kind of like Necromunda, what I tell people with that game, where it looks like there's a megaton to read, and there's quite a bit to learn with these games. But what you do is you start a warband and you start small, because when you start small, you will have fewer guns, no exotic weapons that have all the different special rules and stuff. It's going to be very straightforward. So as long as you take it easy when you're learning, and you really learn how to read these cards in terms of the critical effects and that kind of stuff, it becomes very, very simple. And line of sight is also very, very simple. Let's pretend these two things are models. What you would do is just draw a line between the two of them. Actually, I can do that myself. I can just kind of move these guys up here. If anything intersects in this line, the defender is obscured, which means they get, there's a -2 modifier, or sorry, I should say +2 modifier. It makes it 2 harder for you to achieve your goal. So a 2 would turn into a 4. Again, it's a negative thing as opposed to these modifiers, which make it easier because you're trying to roll equal to or below. So you got that, and in addition, the opponent will get +1 armor. Now what's interesting is if there's multiple things in the way, right, let's say that, you can accrue more than one negative modifier to your attack roll, meaning it'd be -2 for each obstacle in the way. However, your opponent never gains more than 1 extra armor as a result. So like, it gets harder to hit them, but if you hit them, it doesn't have an ever increasing like resistance to damage. So once you hit them, you should be able to do something. Now, one other thing to note about these cards is they really do tell you every single bit of information you need to know about the character that they're playing. If you do not have an icon next to a an attribute for, like, you know, for shooting a specific kind of gun or whatever, means you cannot do that. That's all. So these icons are telling you not only what you have access to, but also what stat you're going to be measuring them against. So you'll see like some monsters, you know, particularly like Deathclaws and stuff, they're not going to have pistol and rifle, you know, information on them. Of course not. They're not using those guns. But they will have, you know, the little knife because it's a melee attack. They'll be coming and ripping at you. You can see on the heroes, they have stuff like lockpicking and hacking. There's a little search where you can basically project your sight out to a certain range and like see any items that are nearby. Help other people in like local distance. What else is there? Obviously, the little heart is your health pool. There's all kinds of information here. And of course, down below, there's always special rules because every game has to have special rules. In particular, the Sole Survivor can use dog meat, the first dog that you meet in Fallout 4, as a companion, and they have like special actions and interactions that they can do together. So we've established that the game is a lot, and in my personal opinion, it's absolutely worth it because it's trying to represent so many different things. If you really get to thinking about the Fallout franchise and how many types of science and weapon and armor and items it actually represents, it's a whole lot, not to mention bringing in the like the Mojave stuff from New Vegas. It's just so much to consider that you can get analysis paralysis very easily when it comes to stuff. There's just a lot of options and things to do. However, what I would say to you is, if you're going to start a game, just act like you would if you were playing Fallout. I mean, and honestly, because there's nothing that you can't do. You know, you can run and jump over obstacles. There's agility tests for that. You can go in guns blazing with one character if you want to. There's some incredible firepower in this game. Everything from like the mini nuke to obviously pistols and guns that we talked about earlier. There's all kinds of fun stuff. So if you just kind of, you know, role play it, this game functions perfectly. It's when you start trying to quote unquote game it that I think it kind of starts to lose some of its luster, because once this stops being like a dungeon explorer / minigame / role-playing game experience and becomes like a true, I guess if you're looking for like a balanced tournament game, I still think it has a lot of gas in the tank in that regard. I think it just becomes very cumbersome. You know what I mean? Because you would have so many items that you wouldn't in a role-playing experience. You would have so many crazy weapons that maybe settlers wouldn't have access to the craziest, highest scientific weapon. The Institute might, but not your average person. So when you min-max and that kind of stuff, it can get pretty wonky, I'm not gonna lie. But on the whole, I would say that I think this is a wonderful narrative experience. Like if you're like me and you love narrative gaming specifically, where you're happy to put self-imposed rules for the sake of like verisimilitude or like making the game feel quote unquote right, it's a perfect slam dunk. Now there's two more things I want to talk about when it comes to Fallout Wasteland Warfare. The first one is the campaign mode. Campaign mode can be played against, it can be single player or against an opponent or opponents. It doesn't really matter. Essentially, the campaign for this functions a lot like the systems from Fallout 4 where you're trying to build settlements. You, as the leader of your settlement, are trying to basically stake out a part of the wasteland for yourself. And every time you go out and do missions, you can collect loot, you can like uncover treasure chests and all these kinds of things, open up toolboxes, unlock safes, hack terminals, all kinds of stuff. As you're collecting all of these things, when the game ends, they all have a quote-unquote caps value. With that value, you can then buy stuff for your settlement and upgrade it and build it. So you start with something simple. I think it's like 2 generators and a storage shed. It's something very meager. And then you build it out from there, and each additional building or thing that you add allows you to retain more things from game to game, gives you all kinds of benefits. It allows you to rest and recuperate your fighters better, all this kinds of stuff. So it's a very like ongoing campaign system, and much in the same way as like Warcry or Crusade or Path to Glory. It doesn't matter who you play against. You can start this, play against 6 different opponents. Your campaign scores don't have to match. There's no winner. You're all just building individual settlements. So you're really just going out, playing a whole bunch of games, and then coming back with the hauls of those games, right? All the loot and the bounty, and finding a way to build and make your warband better and improve everything, which is kind of a mechanic that I really like. It's something I really loved about Wartime back in the day, where, you know, when you got all of the, what do they call it, the warp stone or whatever like that, you can spend it on things, you can augment stuff, you can do all kinds of stuff. It's not just about the procurement of things, but it's the in-between game, what you do with it, that's really cool. It's just more choices and more ways to add flavor. And just to kind of, as a footnote here before we start talking about the AI, I want to note that there's not only missions, which are what, when you set up the table, you and your opponent presumably are trying to play for. There's also quests, and quests are a fun thing. Essentially, between games, you can accept quests, which are essentially just like bonus material for your games. So, for example, you might have a quest that's like, rescue this person's dog, or collect weird moss for Solomon the drug dealer in, Diamond City, which is an actual quest in Fallout 4. Essentially, how that presents itself is the next time you're playing a normal mission, you're going to get the quest card, which has like an optional objective, and if you achieve it, you succeed in the quest. And so that's a fun little thing, because now they can really add flavorful things to pull you out of that gaming the system mentality, right? It's almost like extra achievements, and when you do them, you can get money, you can get bonus weapons, all this kinds of stuff. So it's a fun way to add a lot of flavor, and there are a ton of these quests. Like, I'm going to end the discussion talking about their app, but I'm not kidding you. There's so many frickin' quests that like just will instantly add flavor to some missions that may seem more bland. Like, even if you're playing just, you put your guys on each side and just try to kill each other, which is the most basic mission of any type of war game whatsoever. Just having optional objectives of like, you have to search these 3 terminals over the course of that game is massive, and it adds a lot of flavor. Then when you add the fact that like you and your opponents, even though your campaigns are individual, where you're all building up your own bases, when you both have quests to do, all of a sudden the table's going to look real weird, because you're trying to get to a place, they're trying to get to a place, you're trying to scoop things, steal things off of each other, snipe each other out in a distance, whatever the quest requirements are. It just facilitates very diverse gameplay. Now, lastly, we have to talk about my favorite part of the game, and that is the AI. So the AI system is something that I definitely recommend you wait until you understand the core mechanics to jump into. I really do suggest that, because it's a whole nother thing. But once you learn it, I will say, without question, this is the best single player type of miniature game that I have ever experienced. And let me tell you why. This little card is all you need to know about the actions of the enemy. So we have here, this is the aviator. It's essentially the super mutant with a little aviator hat on. They just call him the aviator, and I love it. Well, he has a stat card that has all the special stats and everything of a normal character that you can play as. So what's this? Well, we'll go to the downward game and I'll explain to you. You see, every card in the game, or every character or type of enemy that you can face, has a card like this. And this is essentially their AI programming, if you will. On this, there's a lot of things. I know it looks like a lot of information, but hold on there. The first thing you're going to do is determine how many wounds does this character have. We can see by the Aviator card, he's going to have a sum total of 8 wounds. So you look here, does he have 8 wounds remaining? Is he been hurt? Is he 4 through 7? Or is he 1 through 3? That'll dictate his actions. Now, as we go down, you're going to see a whole bunch of crazy things. You're going to roll basically one of these dice. It's the blue skill, or not skill die, but effect die. And we're going to look at these things and kind of put them together. That one I think would be a reroll. Let's do this. We'll keep it simple. We're going to start simple, and then we'll get more experience later. If you were to roll this, and let's say he's been shot once, okay? We're going to look at the 4 through 7, because that's how much health he has left, and go down to where it's 1 star. What this means, obviously we've landed on O on our little matrix here, he's going to move towards whatever the objective for the mission is. If the objective is for you to hack a terminal, and your enemy does this, the AI is going to move towards that terminal to intercept you. That's really what it means. If he's already there, he's going to attack you. It's just whatever is keeping you away from doing your objective. Whatever the objective of the game is, that's what he wants to do. We see we have 1 star here. We're going to follow it along. How is he going to try and stop you from that objective? We follow it all the way across. And 1 star means he's going to try and do it with a melee attack. So he's going to try and run up and punch you in the face to stop you. If we had rolled, say, the 2 star option right below it, we would still be going for the objective based on his wounds, but he would try to shoot at you instead of running and punching. And now I mentioned that O is for the objective, meaning he's going to go whatever the objective is. M just means move, A means attack. So this is a very simple one. There are also cards that implement more, I guess, heavier thought, because super mutants are quite dumb, in terms of things like defend, stuff like that. So they can really kind of add a lot. The rulebook has an explanation for what each one of those letters means in terms of mechanical speak of what they're trying to articulate. But there's more going on than just what kind of attack do you use. For starters, down here in the bottom right, they have a priority list. So let's say we do the 2 star one, he's going to shoot somebody. Who's he going to shoot? He's going to shoot according to this little chart down here. His primary target, he wants to shoot the most vulnerable person, meaning who's out in the open, who has the least amount of armor, who can he hurt easiest. The second is the most important person. So if there's no one vulnerable or they're all equally vulnerable, who is the most important? This would, of course, be like your warband leader, or for the purposes of a mission, let's say we're trying to hack a terminal, the closest person to the terminal with a hacking skill, the person who can actually complete the objective, would be the most important. And this third option, if none of those are relevant, is wounded. Has anybody already been hurt? If so, just hurt them. And if none of those apply, pretty much just go for the nearest model. Now, the last bits of information on these cards is how do they go about doing this operation. If a cell is shaded, as you can see, there's some shaded, some that are not. If it's shaded, they're going to act recklessly, meaning they're going to move directly towards the objective or directly towards an enemy without any regard for cover or anything like that. If it's not shaded, then they're acting carefully or cautiously. So they're going to do the same action, but they're going to move in such a way that grants them cover. So it makes them a little bit smarter. And so with that personality change of acting reckless or cautious, as we look at the various cards, you can see how different they will all respond. And lastly, this doesn't come up a ton for me particularly, but if a letter is underlined, it means that they are going to stay in combat if they're already there. If it's not underlined, they can leave combat to do whatever it is. That's all that really means. It's just one more way of adding, like, are they trying to withdraw, retreat, be on the offensive or defensive? That's about it. But to me, the coolest thing is that shading is acting cautiously in their actions and not, because when I was doing my one-player mode for Warcry, I didn't even think to articulate that, and I truly love it, because now you can have enemies that are hiding and ducking for cover and doing defensive things that are all detailed in the rulebook about how to choose what to do, but it just makes the computer, so to speak, feel very alive. Like they're doing things that you're not sure what's going to happen. Combine that with the fact that you randomize which of the AI models activates, you don't actually know. It gets very, very cool. What it means is that every game is different. You're never going to play against the AI doing the exact same thing twice. And then once that's done, you know, like let's say you move towards the objective and you're going to do a ranged attack on the most vulnerable person, then that is resolved just like everything else. You roll your die, you see what you get, and see if you can hurt them. And to round out this video, I wanted to talk about something that makes this game go from, you know, kind of a very eccentric war game that's telling a story into something that is truly awesome, and that's going to be its app. Modiphius has developed one of the most comprehensive apps for a game that I have ever seen. This is the way it looks. It's completely free on their app store. You can just look around at all the different options and kind of get a sense for what the weapons are like and all this kinds of stuff. It's very, very useful. You can also track if you play the Fallout RPG. You can track your character through there. If you track a battle, you can actually input your list as well as the AI's, and it will automatically generate what the actions of the AI are. And not just tell you like, oh, and shaded. It'll like explain in detail. It'll bring up all the rules for whatever it rolled on that chart and tell you exactly how to activate them. And that is incredibly cool because this can be a bit daunting. It's a lot of information on a card, but when you have it here and you just click a button and it just generates, it's so nice. So here on our app, we're looking at this sucker, and let's go to the library, which is just the storage unit of all cards. And here's every card in the game. There is a subscription to have this, but I mean, it's negligible. Honestly, if you're into this game, there's so much replayability that like the $4 it is, it's absurd. So let's take a look here. We're gonna try looking at different units. It'll bring up all the various factions. As you can see, we have a whole bunch of things. Particularly, I love the robots. As well as the New California Republic are really my jam. But let's check out some simple ones, the survivors. Everything from characters from all across the various Fallout games we have here. Some will be recognizable from Fallout 4 in particular. Let's go with Scavenger, something simple. And of course, here's where we have all the information related to their cards. The settlement tracker is how you keep track of your campaign progress. So you can build a settlement here, and this is where you can essentially spend all of the caps you earned from game to increase all the cool things that you get inside of your settlement. Now, one thing to note here, and that's really important, is that this app tracks every single thing under the sun. Okay, let me just get back here to the beginning. Let's try going to a track battle. Now what I've gone ahead and done is set up a quick battle. You can see we have two new forces. The ones at the bottom are settlers and soul survivors. The top ones are super mutants and junk. Sorry about that. Didn't mean to hit it. But essentially when you're playing the game, you can look up your characters. So in mine I have the soul survivor with a 44 revolver, leather armor, and improvised weapons, all kinds of cool stuff. You can keep track of their health and radiation levels, how lucky they are, their armor, and all that kind of stuff. It automates it for you, as well as assign different status effects. These are like frozen, burning, poison, all that kind of jazz. And we're going to go back out here just a smidge, and we're going to look at the super mutants. Now what's cool is if you scroll here, you see get AI action towards the bottom. And this is what I'm talking about. It tells you what it rolled, the 2 stars. It's going to attack and a melee weapon. And so it's literally turning it all into a step-by-step guide. And this is all there is to it. It's just, this response is an AI tactical intent. You're trying to hit somebody in close combat. Follow the steps 1 through 7. It's probably not even going to take you all 7 steps to get into combat, to be perfectly honest with you. A few notes like an FAQ, and then your target priority at the bottom, and then you can basically just do this. And so this is how you can play completely one player. We'll go to the next round. All of a sudden, boom, we have our new cards. Everything gets reset, and we're ready to go. So anyway, I hope you enjoyed this video. I just wanted to talk about this game so much because it's just super fun to me. I would love to start doing battle reports for it on the channel. I know I was very excited to do Warcry battle reports, and then it kind of seems like Games Workshop forgot about it. But this game and its sister game of Call to Arms, the Elder Scrolls Skyrim version, are very, very similar. I have a Skyrim video coming up very, very soon, because when I posted the picture of this, people were immediately curious about Skyrim and wanting a comparison. So those videos are going up this week as well to kind of get that off my docket so I can move on to other content. Anyway, if you have any questions about this game, you can actually get the rules totally for free if you go to like Modiphius' website, or DriveThruRPG also has them for free. You just have to make an account so you can download it. It's really quite a bit of fun. Like, it's a lot to take in. I'm not gonna lie. I'm not gonna sugarcoat it. There's a lot of information. But if you start small with just a simple force with some very relatively simple weapons, and then allow yourself to learn over time, it will be incredibly rewarding for you, because it's very, very deep. It's a deep toolbox of a game. There's missions, there's narrative quests that string missions together. There's obviously your campaign builder, AI. There's just everything here for a total hobby. And it just really does bring Fallout to the tabletop. So anyway, I hope that you enjoyed this review. I'd love to talk more about this game and show off some more stuff for it if you are interested, so let me know in the comments down below. I'll catch you next time. Happy wargaming.